Hello, everyone. I'm George Howard, and welcome to the Cosmic Tusk Podcast. I am joined tonight by two very dear friends, one being the oldest rat in the barn in heretical science, Mr. Randall Carlson. Hello, Randall.
Hello, George.
And then the new kid on the block, Mr. Dan Richards of Dedunking. Hello, Dan Richards out in Oregon.
Hey, George. How you doing? Washington, actually, but close enough.
Oh, it is Washington.
That's all right.
Hey, it's great to have you guys on. I'm going to do a couple of prefatory remarks, and then we're going to get into it. And we don't have a particular agenda here tonight, folks. We're just going to shoot the shit. We want to hear from Randall about the Azores. Dan's got some new theories, and we'll talk about just the general milieu of heretical ancient science, which surrounds us all. But I wanted to let everybody know we're going to still have a Cosmic Summit. I might be calling it CS4 because it could slip into 2027. I don't think so. And we're going to send out a newsletter here, I think this evening, that will give people an option to select some dates that we've had proposed to us by venues. But we're also looking at other venues in Greensboro. I think it's fine to say. We're looking at my hometown down the road, Raleigh, North Carolina, much easier to fly into. And I've been in touch with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and that's moving along, and they've got some pretty good pricing. And I'll tell you, we actually taken a look at Austin, Texas down the road. And when could you do it there? And at least places that have a model where we can kind of reduce the risk factor with this. We've also come up with a good model for the next summit and are going to improve the quality and probably reduce the cost to it. So we're going to do a CS24, or it may be a CS 2026. One other thing. Oh, two other things. Go to the if you are interested at all in supporting the Comet Research Group and the research into the younger Dryas impact hypothesis that is such a frequent discussion amongst all our friends, you can do so. They've got a crowdfunding appeal out right now at cometresearchgroup.org. Okay, so go to cometresearchgroup.org and click donate. If you want to toss in, $5, $10, $50, or if you're one of these big swingers out on the West Coast, we could use a couple of million and put the whole damn thing to bed. Okay. Maybe a little bit more than a couple of million, but somewhere between 2 and 10. You can put the whole thing to bed with just a bunch of shallow soil investigations. It's just not that complicated. But it does cost $2 to $10 million. Okay. Finally, I was on the Hodgecast with my new absolute brother, Mr. Daniel Hodge. And we did a recording in January. It came out yesterday. I had a great time with Daniel. I recommend it. It's called the Hodgecast with Daniel Hodge. Please go subscribe to him. And please, if you're watching this and hadn't done so already, subscribe to the Cosmic Tusk Podcast. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you doing tonight?
Go ahead, Randall.
Go first, Randall. You're senior man to all of us.
I will second what you said about Daniel Hodges. I did a podcast with him as well.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we did a podcast and then he was on his way to see you.
Yeah, within 24, 48 hours, he was up in Raleigh. And the guy's phenomenal because, one, it's a smaller show. It's about the size of this show. It's just getting started. But he does all his stuff in person, including flying across the Atlantic to sit down with you. And That's awesome. I love sitting down with people. You get to do a lot of that. And, C-listers like me, I've been on a few, and it's just great to be on a podcast where you're not looking at a damn Zoom call. So we recommended. You had a fantastic conversation with him, and I was lucky to slip in there too. And we talked about a bunch of wild stuff. I mean, in fact, I'm only two-thirds of the way through it, and I've been on the edge of my seat the whole time because I think I said some stupid shit. But it doesn't get to the Malcolm Bendall part yet. That's where I think I said the stupid shit. So the podcast is waiting until the end to horrify me. But Dan, what you been up to? How you doing, man?
Oh, doing well, thanks. Just been living the dream, lots of research lately, poking my nose into this, that, and the other thing. Ever since my friend Sean pointed out to me a bunch of the stuff about the Pacific Coast, that's been something I've been pouring a lot of energy into.
You have been, and I want to watch some of your shorts and kind of talk about some of the things that you're kicking around.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah. One of the coolest things, we start with it. The elongated skulls at one point in history, like recorded history, there's white explorers that were up in the Pacific Northwest in like the late 1700s, early 1800s. And they saw on one place about 3,000 Native American burials that were all above ground. And all of those burials had elongated skulls. Every one of the Native Americans west of the Cascade Mountains up in the north and Washington and Oregon. All of the Native Americans that were not low-born had their craniums modified by their parents. So when you saw them like a burial site for their rank and file Native American, they were all elongated skulls. So there were thousands of them over there. And then the phrenology took off and they started getting looted so heavily that, there's none left.
Randall, why do you think that ancient peoples elongated their skulls in the Americas and possibly Egypt? I don't mean to switch to you because you weren't looking to speak this subject. I'm going to ask Dan the same question. He'll give him a moment to prepare. But why the hell did they do that?
I have no idea, George.
Yeah.
You can ask me about a lot of things and I would have opinions on them, but I don't have an opinion on that.
Either.
I really don't.
It's got to be painful. It's got to have some neurological effect.
If it's not
slow,
if these individuals are not being born with this elongated condition in their skull, and it's actually being created by having their head being bound, such as some cultures do. They bind their feet, right? In China, they would bind the women's feet, so they would have these petite feet. For whatever reason, that was considered attractive. Do you think it's just cosmetic, or do you think that there is actually? Are we talking?
Dan, what do you think? Now you've been looking into it. I like the fact that Randall doesn't have an opinion because I don't except maybe they're making them look like aliens, and of course that's the quiet part out loud. Okay.
Well, it's funny. The Native American belief and the belief of the Europeans at the time that we were really into that stuff kind of dovetailed. They believed that it made them better, that it made them smarter. Like the Chief Comley, who was, and this is an interesting part of this. This story has really been erased from the record. At the end, when Lewis and Clark published their journal about like 15 years or so after they got back, right? And when they did, there were two Native Americans that were super popular. One of them, Sacagawea, we all heard of her. The other one was Comley, and he was an elongated skull. Native American, had one bad eye, very shrewd trader. He was so loved by the other white folk up in this area that when Fort Astoria was moved from his village's place, just 30 miles downriver, he openly wept. Like he would stop other natives that the younger guys would get mad and be like, "We're going to go kill all the white men," and he'd be like, "Hey, whoa! Do you see how nice their clothes are? Do you see how cool their weapons are? Do you see any of their women or children? What the fuck do you think is going to happen when they bring in their kids and their families? You don't want to mess with these guys, man. We ain't even seen what they're capable of yet." He was very smart, and he believed that was what made him smart.
But he was a flathead. You called him that.
He had a. His cranium was big time modified. I'll pull up a picture of it here when somebody else starts talking, because I do have some on my computer. But yeah, his skull, it's not quite to the degree of some of the most extreme ones in Paracas, but it's right there with those. And an interesting point is, in Paracas, they were all buried in open grave bundles in caves. You would be put in a burlap bag, you'd be tied up. But when you buried Dad, you saw Grandpa's body. You saw your great grandpa's body. So you had this touchstone and thinking, maybe I need to keep my skull like this because it's our people's way. The Native Americans up here had two different styles of burial, really. One of them was to put in a canoe and raise it up off the ground and just kind of let the elements have their way with it. But by keeping it up off the ground, usually on an island or something like that was inaccessible to predators, it would, they would, same thing. You go to bury your dad, you see Grandpa's remains, you see his skull. The other way that they had it was they would build these weird above ground crypts that were like made of driftwood, and it was interlocking kind of teepees made of driftwood, and they would just set dude in there, and so you would go in there, and again, so it's interesting that you see this kind of ubiquitous feature of them. You would see Grandpa when you buried Dad, so you had this touchstone as to why you would keep doing it. Because yeah, man, that one of the European explorers flat out said when he witnessed the binding of one of these babies' heads, the eyes bulged out like a mouse caught in a trap. It's like I said, it was comical. Said it was like hideously comical. So yeah, a parent doing that shit's got to have a reason.
People are strange, man.
People are crazy. But yeah, there used to be thousands of those around here, and then the phrenology was like all the rage, right? If you guys remember, know what that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that
What's phrenology, Randall?
It's the study of the shape of your skull.
Okay.
Which
yeah, and how it
can infer, which there's probably some element of truth to it, but again, I have not, I have not studied it to the point.
Well, it was disputed as kind of a racist practice, and certainly had overwhelming elements of that, right?
Yeah.
But this would be separate from what ancient people, or these people weren't particularly ancient. Speaking of which, Dan, you're saying that the vast majority of those Indians, but when you see Native Americans depicted, and there were plenty painted even in the early days, or I don't see a lot of that.
No, you almost never do. Even now in the rest areas where they talk about the Chinook people, it's just been kind of erased. And I think some of it is, because there was so much of it done, and so many of these skulls were looted that you want to talk about like serious white guilt. This is something where, I mean, that Chief Concomly, who was super buddy with everybody, 3 years after he died, an Oxford surgeon went and chopped his fucking head off and mailed it back. Like it was like, it doesn't matter how cool he was. It's
it was still brutal.
And it's all over. There's pictures. I wish I'd have put the file on there, but I've got a Mac, and so my USB stuff has to plug in through this dongle.
But you can shoot it to Randall. But hold on, I was just wondering just what's on your mind lately, Randall. What's on your mind lately, and give us a little, or a medium, or however you like, a report on the Azores.
Well, George, there's a lot to unpack there, but I've been really trying to. I've sort of honed in on this outlier piece of evidence that the date to me is a key thing. You know what a lurking variable is, George?
No.
Lurking variable, in statistics you have a base, you have data points, and then you do various manipulations to those data points, and then you draw generalized conclusions from the interaction of those data points. But when you're collecting your data, typically you're going to see a clustering if everything is kind of in a general zone of association. But then you got these outliers, right, that somehow don't fit. You've got a database of dates, for example, and they're all honing in on 7,000 BP, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you got a couple that are coming in at 6,000 or 9,000 or 10,000 that just are outside. They're outliers, right? Generally, in a statistical analysis, those outliers are thrown out. Well, sometimes though, those outliers, though, if they're introduced into the analytical equations, will completely, just one outlier, plug it into the equation, and it completely changes the outcome. So that's the lurking variable. See, it's that one outlier. Most of the time you can dismiss the outliers and they aren't going to affect your conclusions too much, right? The lurking variable is the thing that you put that in, and the consequences of the inclusion of that thing are orders of magnitude beyond any of the other data points, because none of those other data points are having that degree of effect. So what I'm getting at here is one of these data points, I am always looking for that lurking variable. In this case, the lurking variable is 9,000 years before Solon's exile to Egypt.
There you go.
Which lines up exactly with the end of the Younger Dryas.
That's right.
That's the key.
I mean, within 100 years. Yeah.
Yes.
Whatever. It's exact.
To me, we have two choices. Either it's a coincidence or it's not a coincidence. If it's not a coincidence, then what does that mean? Where did this ultimately data come from? Does this imply that if it's not just a coincidence or something that Plato made up, or it's some exaggeration by an order of magnitude that 900 years before when Santorini erupted, that's what Plato is really talking about, and they somewhere along the line they lost to zero, so it became 900 years, which then made it associated with the eruption of Santorini in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Right.
So they have these various manipulative techniques where you can kind of get around looking at the other lurking variable that's in Plato's account is his reference to the true continent beyond the Atlantic, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, he makes that reference. So there's two major points in there in his dialogues that I've latched onto, and I think they're both lurking variables. Because one, I think that remark that Plato makes about the true continent is probably a remnant of an ancient knowledge of the North American continent. And then on the other hand, that date, if that's not a coincidence, that means there has been a tradition going back at least 9,000 years in the so-called sacred registers of Egypt, as the priests told Solon. So those two things alone are generally just completely ignored by the critics of the whole, usually because most of the critics haven't even looked at the situation of Atlantis. They don't know the details. They haven't read the dialogues. If they have read the dialogues, they're looking at them strictly through the filter of the Aristotelians, which that whole school of thought believed that it was all just essentially made up as a metaphor. Whereas the school coming from Proclus accepted that what Plato meant it when he said, no, this is real. This really happened. No, we're not making this up. He says it over and over and over again in Timaeus and Greece. This is true. We're not making this up. So if you look at the Crantor school, from which we know about through Proclus, what we see is, there's this whole other wing that took it at face value and said, he meant it. There really was this place in the Atlantic Ocean, and he describes the geography almost to a T. And when we follow his geography to a T, what do we discover? Well, we discover there's a sunken landmass right in the middle of the fucking Atlantic Ocean, sitting astride the triple plate junction of the African plate, the North American plate, and the European plate. Right there, boom. And it is a landmass almost the size of Iceland. It's referred to as a microcontinent. All of the empirical data is consistent with it having been subaerial 12,000 years ago.
Fantastic. Did y'all go ahead?
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to sneak in something real quick. You talk about the, it's one of the favorite sticks that the debunkers like to hit Atlantis with is, Plato was this was a metaphor. Plato was trying to make a political point here. He was trying to convince his contemporaries of this, that, or the other thing. This is just an argument. And it's like, okay, well, if you take that we'll just take that position on its face. If Plato was arguing that from today's perspective, if he's alive today and he's saying, the West is falling, would he be using Rome as a touchstone, or would he use freaking Narnia as a touchstone? He'd use Rome, and that's an obvious reason, because if you're trying to convince your contemporaries of something, you don't come at them with freaking fantastic bullshit. You try to come at them with a metaphor that's grounded in reality. So in my thinking, the fact that he used a lost, sunken city as at the very least proof that his contemporaries believed that it was true.
Exactly. Yes. Actually, yes, of course, he could have taken a historical memory of a real event and juxtaposed his own conceptions of morality on that. But whether he did that or not, the point is that he didn't have to conjure that up out of nothing, and he almost certainly didn't conjure that up out of nothing. And that's because, again, it gets back to those 2 points. I mean, did those ancient Greeks have a tradition, or other people? Who are they descended from? When you go back to that area, who are the original Ionians of that era that settled in that land? Who would have known about the North American continent such that that Plato would have had access to that belief system, and not just throw that in there hey, you know what? Let's imagine that, this power came forth out of the Atlantic Ocean from the west. You go to some islands. There's more islands, and then you're in Atlantis, and then you go beyond those islands, and you're at the real continent beyond the real ocean, because the Mediterranean, is nothing but a harbor.
I'll only add that y'all remember Steve Collins, who spoke at the summit. Christian archaeologist, biblical archaeologist, a tremendous friend. I went over to Tal al-Imam on their dig a couple of times. One of his things, and I've never gone and investigated, it'd be an interesting question for Chad, my friend Chad, who stays up all night in California. You only pay him $29 a month, and he'll give you any answer anytime. Great guy. But I want to ask Chad. Collins says that no mythology has imagined places. And this is decades of research. And he comes from the Bible and says, and if you go look at the Bible, he says the Bible is filled with geography. right? They walked here, they walked there. I mean, you can sit there, you flip page after page, and you're like, this is just like a travel log. I mean, and he uses that a point specifically out of the Bible. Then he expands it and says that actually ancient people didn't make up places on the earth. That if they said a place was there, it was actually there. And Heinrich Schliemann proved that with Troy, right? That's one of the foundations of archaeology, is that it surprises you that if you go and run into it, and now we're dealing with it with the Labyrinth, right? They didn't bother about, right now, maybe there were exaggerations, as they're always accused of, but they didn't make it up from whole cloth. Would you agree?
Yeah. As a matter of fact,
I would second that.
Yeah. They didn't have imaginary worlds. And we kind of picture mythology as having imaginary worlds, but those worlds were actually real worlds one way or another.
Well, there's definitely parts of mythology that they cheat on, but the parts that they cheat on tend to be, there's really two things. One of them is war and battle, right? It's always, we saw this in World War II, we shot down 400 planes, not 200. It's, it's always a little bullshit there. And the other one back in those days you see a lot of was a dynasty list, king's lists and stuff. And that was a simple reason, because anytime you have any sort of bullshit behind the scenes, you just change that king's list, and your rank and file people, they die faster than your rulers do anyway, and they're certainly illiterate, so the odds of them remembering the king's list from 30 years ago is slim to none. But geography, on the flip side, by using that is the kernel of truth to your lie. You use something like that to reinforce all these, so you keep these touchstones that are stable and whatnot. And so, you do actually see a lot of geographical things that are described really well. And even when other aspects of a story or a myth will change, that the cliffs or whatever stay the same. It's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought of it till you mentioned it, but thinking about it, that's off the top of my head, does seem to bear out.
Randall, Steve Kahn says all mythology, geography is real. What do you think?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think that's absolutely the derivative.
Mythology. And again, we're using that in quotes.
Well, the derivative insight of Plato that we're just talking about, I think, is a preeminent example of that. But I mean, there's hundreds of examples all over the world. Yes, I think that underneath the outer forms of these mythic stories, legends, folklore, tales, customs that have come down to us, there are real events. I kind of, that was the whole idea behind the Halloween Day of the Dead presentation that I put on a couple of times now. Is that
I love it. It's actually my favorite presentation of yours, which is saying a lot.
Well, it's what it's saying is that you're still just a kid inside, George, and you loved Halloween, and you loved dressing up in your monsters and going out and getting trick or treats and getting a lot of candy and being able to just stuff your face with it, right?
Who knew it had to do with the periodic meteor stream we encounter twice a year that traumatized civilizations over time, so that global civilizations all incorporate into their calendar a day or a week of the dead? And it always falls in November, early November, late October, man. When the conquistadors landed in Central America, one of the first things, as good Catholics as a conquistador would be, was they compared they said, oh my God, we got the same Day of the Dead. I forget what they call it. It's Dia de Muerta, in Mexico today, and I forget what Catholics do, but there's some recognition. It's a spooky week, is one way to put it. Yeah. Shallow way to put it. But can you imagine that they put that together, and they must have gone, somehow we know each other.
Well, I mean, heck, go back to the skulls I was babbling about. There's the Kelp Highway hypothesis that this is mainstream archaeology now, is saying that the way that they're reconciling the earlier peopling of the Americas with the Clovis culture is saying that they popped down the entire coast of the Americas from Siberia over to Canada, all the way down to South America. And if you look at Paracas, Peru, it's 5 miles or so from that candelabra of the Andes that faces right out into the ocean. You can see it 12 miles away. And it's, even with crappy vessels, it's like a 2-week voyage from there up to the Pacific Northwest. All those people having similar, cranial modification stuff. It's pretty interesting. It seems to me quite unlikely that they would have developed those without having been in touch with each other. And that's just really it, is all of a sudden you have this very clear picture of contact between the old world and the new, farther back in prehistory than it's given credit for. And then we have the obvious, like, telltale signs of culture being passed along, not just we share arrowhead. It's
or
actual
shared experience, Dan, because in terms of the, celebrating the
The Day
same
of the
week of the dead as the Tards, that would have been, I believe, cross-cultural contacts of all sorts types, but not persistent, not cross-cultural building. But you would have experienced the same bad days.
Yeah.
So over time and over hundreds of generations, it become inculcated with you that was a bad weekend to watch out. And then you go compare notes, and it turns out that somebody else was taking notes, and you don't know they were taking them together. Randall, tell us a little bit about Halloween.
Well, like
it's not the season at all. In fact, it's the complete opposite of the season.
No, by some strange quirk or coincidence, we get back to that word again, coincidence. The peak of the autumn torrid shower that we cross, like you said, twice each year occurs right there during those last few days of October and say roughly the first week of November. But it pretty much has peaked right around the time that the Pleiades culminates on the sky. When the Pleiades, if you can picture the royal arch, a little bit of esoteric symbolism. You got a royal arch and you got the keystone. That always was very symbolic to many ancient cultures, particularly European cultures, and particularly has a Masonic overtone, Templar overtone to it. But this idea, this model of the royal arch and the keystone, but you project that up onto the sky, and then you've got the culmination point, which is, if we're in the northern hemisphere, it's when you're looking due south. And you look at the arch comes over, so any particular object, star group, star, etc., is going to rise in the east, and it's going to come up, and roughly at midnight, at your local time, it's going to be right up there at the zenith, right? So the thing I'm getting at here is, though, for the northern hemisphere, if you go out on Halloween night and you stand facing the south, right up there occupying the royal arch, the keystone of the royal arch is the Pleiades. And if you were watching a torrid meteor stream, particularly in the past when it was probably orders of magnitude more impressive than it is now, when you might have been having, hundreds perhaps per minute or more.
Yeah, fortunately, it's presumably it only gets less dangerous.
Right.
Just to show we are not fear mongers. Now, there's plenty of fear available, but there's no reason to believe they get more dangerous except episodically.
But visualize this, George. You go out Halloween night and you look to the south and you're looking up there, and there's the shoulder of the bull up there, the Pleiades, and you're watching these fireballs coming down. And as you look them back, they're tracing right back to a 1 point perspective that's almost zero bullseye right on the Pleiades. Right, almost dead on the Pleiades, right? So the outpouring, if you look at the Mithraic imagery, where Mithras is stabbing the shoulder of the bull, it's exactly where the Pleiades are located within the classic depictions of Taurus the bull up in the sky. And then, of course, the blood is pouring forth from the wound in the shoulder of the bull. Well, that, I think, is an astronomical image that it's actually referring to, Mithras stabs his sword into the Pleiades, which is consistent with the Jewish tradition that when the great flood came upon the earth, it was caused by God pulling out one of the Pleiades and throwing it to the earth.
But Taurus the bull, why is it focused on the Pleiades instead of, I think the Taurids, I thought they came from the Taurus.
But the Pleiades is up in is part of Taurus. If you look at Taurus, it's up in the corner. Yeah, it's all right. I had this conversation actually with a friend of mine, Sean, the guy that introduced me to those skulls. He's a local buddy of mine, and he's really into a lot of astronomy stuff. But his is a lot more on the computer and doing research. And I learned it Boy Scout style with the compass in the hand and binoculars in the other hand, right? And so the Taurus, Pleiades, Orion, those are all related. Like when I look at the picture of I think it's in a Cyberic, they got the dude that's holding this junk, and on both sides of him there's a cat coming at him. It's a engraving on a wall in one of these ancient Turkey tepe sites. And right next to it, there's a bull charging a guy, and the guy's kind of jumping up, but he's got a club raised up. And it's like, I know what that is. That's Taurus and Orion together. neither one is just like the Pleiades. Neither one of these is individual. The hunter and the bull are, the ancients saw the two together, right?
Yeah. Well, you see them together in the sky.
Exactly. But a lot of people don't see the stuff in the sky anymore. They see it on a computer screen.
Right.
So they miss that.
Well, and George, that the peak of the summertime torrids occurs right around the end of June.
Which is significant for what reason?
For what reason, right?
Because June 30th was Tunguska.
Yep. Now, if you look at a map of the radiant point of Tunguska, I think it's Tunguska. I think I looked it up. It was more like Tunguska. I for years said Tunguska.
Yeah, so do I, but that's just where redneck. You're an adopted redneck Southerner. That's just the way we say it. Dan, despite being blue collar, would probably say Tunguska.
I'm such a redneck. I just call it the Kremlin version 1.0. We were just testing out the first one there.
And I didn't mean to regionalize rednecks. I've actually found they're global, and I find that comforting. I find it comforting. It's just everybody's got a different name for them.
We have rednecks in Minnesota. But
yeah, I have rednecks in Minnesota. I know, but we claim them so fully in the South.
See, George, I'm a hybrid because my mom's from Louisiana and my dad's from Minnesota.
Oh, I'd forgotten she's from Louisiana.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all know I went down there. Late in the fall, I guess it was, and we still hadn't put it together into kind of a little mini documentary or the way that our friend Beckett Fusick and team at Titan can put things together. But I went down and visited the Perkins Plume site, right?
Yeah.
And I know Randall's somewhat familiar. Does that, Dan, that's where the Comet Research Group published a paper last summer identifying the first touchdown of a superheated plume during the Younger Dryas. And by a touchdown, folks, if you imagine that there are certain things that come in and keep their coherence, they think of it like staying a rock, staying a piece of metal, slams in the ground. Of course, it vaporizes. If you've studied crater formation, oftentimes there's nothing left, but something actually hit the ground and dug out a big crater. There's a whole nother class of objects that come in that are lighter or more friable and have different densities that create a plume of 7,000 degrees that touches the ground, and it's just like a nuclear bomb. And that's what we believe happened at the Younger Dryas event, that there were 4,000 to 6,000 of these. And we found one in Louisiana, and the Comet Research Group published on it. And I went out down there with my new buddy, Robert Fritzenreiter, and I got a bunch of pieces of it. Look at this. Pieces of his family's Louisiana farm. And when the Comet Research Group, these are tektites, technically.
Yeah,
right. Right. And their morphology was such that you've got to have 7,000 degrees, and you got to mix the things that are right there to mix, plus a little bit of cosmic material.
Yeah.
So if you reverse engineer the recipe, you had to have an oven that was 7,000 degrees in an instant, and it whipped everything into a boiled mess of hell, and then left it on his farm, and it doesn't have a typical circular crater. That it leaves that this kind of interaction, it just don't look like that. But there are thousands of them. And the Comet Research Group is studying at least 3 more right now, right around the U.S. I think one in Minnesota, actually, and one in New York, and one somewhere else. But the Fritzenreiters, their grandfather said in the 1930s, he said, we've got a crater in the backyard. And I bet both of you, and I bet Randall for sure, you remember in the 1930s, craters were not, it was disputed.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the 1930s at all. Do you, Randall? Sorry.
I remember them quite distinctly, in my first few years of life, but those memories have been fading with time.
Oh, well, not that damn. Which brings to mind, if I grow a scratchy grayish beard, can I get on Rogan?
I don't know.
Is that the media key? Like if I hired like a media person, they'd say, look, just join the club, get a scratchy gray beard.
Yeah. You want to look like a wise, scholar, philosopher of old.
Well, it's funny how it breaks out. You go Santa, and Dan goes kind of roadie, right?
It's homeless. Just say it. Just it's fine. White street trash works. I said it in my last video. I call myself street trash openly. It's fine. I'm okay with
I like it. Somebody called our buddy Ben Van Kerkwick roadie for Metallica. A roadie for Metallica, man. I love it.
Yeah. But yeah, there's an interesting myth that I come across in my research that's it was really fun because you know how Glacial Lake Missoula, I know Randall talks about this quite a bit. In my opinion, still like the piece of work of yours, Randall, that I love to bring up more than anything else is talking about the tensile strength of ice in Glacial Lake Missoula. There's a Native American myth that's from over near the coast, again, these elongated skull people. And they said that there was an otter and it was acting the ass and thrashing around in one of the lakes around that area. And every time that it would thrash, it would create this flood. And so at first I'm like, okay, that kind of sounds like the mainstream version of the 100 floods from the lake. And then it said, but one time it thrashed really hard, and this flood was so bad that the water tore all the way through and took the otter itself all the way out to sea.
Really?
And then the otter continued to thrash. And then the coyote god got sick and tired of this shit, drags the otter up on, and it was eating all these other things in the water, whales and stuff. So the coyote god drags it up onto the shore, kicks its ass and kills it, and then carves its body up to make all the different tribes. And so that it'll be like the greedy tribe came from its stomach, the smart tribe came from its head, blah, blah, blah. But it's interesting for a few reasons. One is it's like it shows that there was, in their myths anyway, some huge flood that came through, one that was absolutely catastrophic, but that the mainstream explanation of a few smaller floods actually does, and the two could completely coexist. I don't have a problem with that. And then it also shows that this was before the modern tribes, because they were to be carved from the dead body of the otter. So this jives with what we see in the record, where basically there's that hard line of, we don't see Clovis shit anymore. We don't see that same toolkit anymore. It's just boop, gone, and now we see new stuff pops up in its place. So
Randall?
Well, I'm glad you brought up that Dan brought up the Missoula flood, because that to me is the key point right there, is that the tensile strength of ice is orders of magnitude too weak to withstand the kind of pressures that would be implied by an ice dam withholding a 2,100 foot hydraulic head of water. It makes no sense at all. And the point being that
it literally makes no physical sense. It does not pencil out. Right?
No, it does not.
Yeah.
But if you look at the whole phase of deglaciation, it's a very complex thing. And the mainstream media, or the mainstream guys, with what I think the antiquated view, which is that there was 40 to 90 or more floods, all caused by ruptures of the ice dam. There were dozens of floods. Huge floods, big floods. But when we look at the Bonneville flood, that was an unbelievable flood. It was about 40 million cubic feet per second, which is, that's 40 times like Mississippi River at maximum discharge during some of the great floods like 93 and 1927 and so on. If you take that size of the Mississippi River at its greatest flood times 40 of those, that was the Bonneville flood. But 400 of those was some of the Missoula floods. Now, how do you
I had the good fortune to see the Mississippi at exactly 1 million feet per second.
Yeah,
right? Or CFS. Yeah, it is CFS, right? So 1 million. It was at a spring flood in 2011 or 12, and it's been helpful, because when you say that, or I hear other things that it's that many millions, I actually saw what 1 million feet a second looks like. And my God, it was the biggest river in the United States at full stage, and it was scary. Don't they also call the flood and I want to say, is it Spokane or Spokane to the locals?
Spokane.
It is Spokane.
Yeah,
okay, but it's also called the Spokane flood. It's got many names.
Well, right? It used to be. They've hijacked that. Jay Harlan.
And you're in Spokane. Just a bit.
Yes, sir. I'm in Spokane right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, J. Harlan Brett's and Randall probably knows more about this than me, so I'll let the teacher correct me if I get any of this wrong. But J. Harlan Brett's was the geologist that really got that whole thing going, and he called it the Spokane flood.
Yes.
But after he finally got this stuff, after they finally got it accepted, they've called it the Missoula floods. And my guess would be to kind of take anything to pull a little bit away from. Brett's had to be wrong because he wanted one big flood, you see. So we got to make sure that's not his idea. So we'll call it the Missoula floods, but it's the same fucking thing.
Yeah, and George, I mean, initially Brett's did think it was one large flood, but by the time that was when he published his 1923 paper. He was describing one giant flood and thinking that the flood waters issued from the frontal margin of the ice sheet, essentially across pretty wide range of longitude, rather than being a point discharge, which is the way the conventional models now would look at it, because the ice dam breaks in Lake Missoula, which is pretty much all in Montana. If you look at a map and you look at Montana and you look at Idaho, the dividing line, the state line there is right there, exactly where they're placing the ice dam. Now, the ice dam itself is not going to be just a wall of ice, but the water at that point is 2,100 feet. It's at the high level of the water mark. If you're in that Coeur d'Alene River Valley, just to the east of Lake Pend d'Oreille, which is the remnant of where the ice dam supposedly was, at that point, you're at 4,000. You're at right at about 2,000 to 2,100 feet above sea level. Well, up at 4,200 feet is the remnants of a shoreline. Right. And that shoreline marked the high water mark, which is basically 4,200 feet above sea level. And you can trace that all the way throughout, up through the whole headwaters of the Clark Fork River, right up to Flathead Lake. Right up there, and you can trace that 4,000, that's the magic level, 4,200 feet above sea level. Okay, so the point is that in the conventional model, you have ice dam, lake fill, takes 50 to 100 years to fill. It gets to the top, it busts through, probably through subglacial drainage first, maybe very much like the failure of the Teton Dam in 1976. But the idea is, and then 50 to 100 years goes by, the ice continues to extend south from the Purcell Trench, which is this valley headed north above Lake Pend d'Oreille. That ice came back down and sealed the valley of the Clark Fork and caused the lake to refill. And this happened 40 times to 80 times, 90 times, 100 times. And I say it didn't even happen once. But what we're seeing is the entire deglaciation of the southern sector of the Cordilleran ice sheet. So the question boils down to this. Okay, we all accept that there was a great flood, but what was the origin of that flood? In the conventional models, it's an attempt to sort of constrain it within a uniformitarian framework. So we can now witness going on in the last 100, 200 years, even right down to modern times, we've seen outburst floods from ice-dammed lakes. Well, all we need to do is
Jucalops or whatever.
From that by 1,000, 10,000 or more times, literally, and we've got this 620, 630 cubic mile body of water filling these mountain valleys in western Montana. It's all being held in by glacial ice, which by definition and necessity would have to be temperate ice. Why? Because it has to be temperate ice, not polar ice, because temperate ice is implied by the presence of this huge mass of water.
What is stronger, tempered or polar ice?
Well, polar ice is frozen and fixed to the base. Temperate ice is moving. It's very dynamic. It typically has fractures and moulins in it. Sometimes it go from the surface to the base, but it also has enormous volumes of basal meltwater, subglacial meltwater that polar ice does not, because polar ice is frozen to the substrate. Temperate ice is
moving and melting.
Moving and melting. See, now, the implication here, of course, is that this has to be a temperate environment, because if it was a polar environment, you're not going to have 600 cubic mile lakes sitting there, right? It's going to all have been converted into glacial ice. But that's not the case. You've got massive amounts of water. You've got this huge, very stable ice dam, and the two are not compatible. So I think we have to go back to the question of what's the origin of this water. And it's not Lake Missoula. Lake Missoula was a secondary, tertiary holding pond. Water discharged.
Occasionally drained holding pond.
Backfilled Missoula and then drained out the only outlet that was below the 4,200 foot above sea level, and that was Clark Fork River Valley. So that lake drained out. But here's the thing: there's a lot of ice. If we look at the watershed of the Columbia River, which is what we're talking about here, we're looking at over 100,000 square miles. And depending on how you configure the topography during the Ice Age, it could have been a lot more than that. Well, it would have been a lot more than that. So that's very conservative. We might be looking at a couple of 100,000 cubic miles of ice that was there 15,000 years ago and was completely gone by, other than mountain glaciers, isolated by 8,000 years ago. Within that deglaciation phase, there was at least a couple of accelerated meltwater pulses, giant meltwater pulses that discharge, in the case of the Cordilleran, discharging into the Pacific, in the case of the Laurentide ice sheet, discharging into the Atlantic. But both ice sheets seem to show that the melting was not uniform. It was pulsed, right? Each of these pulses, of large size pulses and smaller intermediate pulses, each one of them contributed to the imprint of a flood in the landscape. And that's what these guys are looking at correctly. But it's not explained by the draining of Lake Missoula held in by an ice dam. It's explained by the pulsed catastrophic melting of all of the glacial ice that pretty much sat on top of the Columbia watershed at the end of the last ice age. That's not there now. And where would it go? The one direction it's going to go is to the south.
I've got questions too, but Dan, you shoot.
No,
You're living there.
Well, really quickly, I noticed about a year and a half ago, just for the people that are watching, going, "Oh, doesn't know what he's talking about." The experts already have this pegged down. There's a paper that was published about a year and a half ago where they're trying to figure out where all this fucking extra water came from. So they're talking about water coming down from the Cordilleran ice sheet and pouring down, like water underneath the glaciers and pouring down, and this attributing to the larger floods because they can't figure out where all this water came from. So first of all, they haven't got it figured the fuck out. So Randall's it's for those who want to just shut Randall down on that, which I always know there's those people typing already, right? And then the other thing is, have you ever heard of the Bridge of the Gods, Randall?
Oh,
it's
yeah,
over
I've been there multiple times. Yeah.
Okay. The Native American legends of that place. The bridge that went across there was had a tunnel in it. The tunnel was so long and so dark that most tribes would only let the bravest of the braves go in it. The artistic representations always just show it as just kind of like some rubble over the river, but there's other legends that talk about a mystical fire, the sacred first fire, some woman guarding it. Honestly, the tunnel sounds to me more like a maintenance tunnel, the kind of thing you would see running alongside a bridge, or like when you get on a tram to go from one part of the airport to the other, and you see that spot where dumbasses like me have to walk along and fix your outlets. Because it was so long that it was the only way to get downstream. And by the time Lewis and Clark got to that area, it would all of this had collapsed into the river and whatnot. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has torn it up even more so that they could get boats through that area. But that Bridge of the Gods was named the Bridge of the Gods for a fucking reason. It's anomalous as hell, and there's not a whole lot of.
I'm gonna call up Bridge of the Gods. That one's a new one to me, and I've heard a lot of.
It's right on the flood east of Portland.
Yeah, you want to look up Bridge of the Gods myth. You want to look up the myths for it because, as a matter of fact, I bet you I've still got a list of that crap on my computer here.
And you know what that did was it created
But what's the geological feature? I'm looking at a bridge now.
It's a landslide. Well, there's a bridge there. They call it the Bridge of the Gods. But there, what Dan was just talking about, there was Native American legends about it, and the geological explanation is that there was a gigantic mass wave.
Yeah, I got a good one.
That plugged the river, caused a backup, and then at some point the river rose to enough height that it had the pressure to breach the dam. But it's very likely, Dan, from what you were saying, that and totally realistic that the water could have easily carved a subterranean tunnel through the dam.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah, the myths. The myths
Where's the
talk about
landslide? Hold on.
well, the landslide's gone now. It's where the Cascade Rapids used to be. By the time Lewis and Clark came through, they reported it looked like it had been submerged for no longer than a couple hundred years, based on the tree growth in the area. But the Bridge of the Gods was like Mount Hood and Mount St. Helens, I think, were the
Never
ones
heard of it.
Yeah, they said that these two, like the myths where those two fought, they created the bridge and then they fought some more and destroyed it.
But y'all accept this was in
This is
relatively modern times, hundreds of years.
This on the Columbia River, and this was basically the people that the natives that Lewis and Clark met had this stuff not quite in living memory, but like pretty close to living memory, the kind of thing they talked about their great grandpa knowing. Here I grabbed that book really quick while we're talking about this stuff. Let me show you one of. Here's that chief skull that I was talking about.
Wow.
Oh my Lord! Hold on. Let me get you off the thing here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Boom. Okay, there we go.
So if I start binding my skull, and then as it takes that shape, I will get progressively more intelligent. Is that?
Well, it's funny that's you have to do it when you're young, right? But it's funny that the natives believed that, but so did the phrenologists, and they believed it in different ways. But that was why it was also such a hot to trot thing, was because phrenology was a science, and here was supposedly, and here's something that we're like, here's a playground for it. You know, this guy's skull's born like that. That guy's skull's born like this. These guys are over there playing with skulls. I wonder how that fucking works out. So,
What do you mean? Hold on, no, give me that again.
Okay, phrenology is the study of not just the study of skulls, but the study of the traits of skulls and how they affect human behavior. This is why it's considered racist, because, like, black people were considerably less educated in those days, so they would, give an IQ test to a black dude and a white dude, and they would measure the skulls and say, see, these dots on your head make you stupid, these dots make you smart. But phrenology, but these Native Americans binding their skulls kind of flies in the face of that, or tests that, however you want to look at it. It's like, instead of the skull being shaped like this equals this level of intelligence or these attributes, it's these guys are shaping their skulls. Does this actually doing anything? It's a kind of a testing ground to see if it does actually affect intelligence, if it did any good or not. So it's actually funny. Like I said, there were thousands of these skulls around. You are hard pressed to find records of any of them. And a lot of that, obviously, a lot of them have been repatriated to the natives. And for some reason, they don't want to tell any of the white people where the fuck their skulls are a second time around.
It's a shame I never came across this 20 years ago, or young Henry Howard would have a distinctive skull. I'd flatten that thing in a heartbeat.
Well, I was joking. I joked a couple of times about this, like we were talking about foot binding, Randall. Somebody asked me if we've done any tests on this, and I said, well, I think honestly, we haven't for human rights violations reasons, but I think what we should do is just clone somebody, and we could test foot binding and head binding on them, mitigate the human rights violations by 50%, and ask her 2 questions at once. So this is why they don't elect me king.
Hey, speaking of intelligence, you two have something in common. You're autodidactic, which is a great word that you've probably come across, but maybe the audience hasn't. And autodidactic means self-taught.
Oh, I thought it meant I was gay. I was gonna say no, man.
No. Now, Randall, had an undergraduate geology degree, if I understand, but obviously, what percentage of your geological knowledge is taught outside of the classroom, Randall?
Oh, well, most of it. I mean, a couple of years of geology courses, but basically I was there primarily to have access to the labs, because I was studying mineralogy and I wanted to learn mineralogy. A lot of the rest of it I had already learned on my own, because I didn't really start formal education till I'd been studying these subjects for at least a decade.
Okay,
so
I didn't know that.
Had a head start.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I focused on geology, astronomy, and mathematics.
Well, that seems appropriate. Dan, did you ever take any formal training? But Brandon, I would say it's got to be 99%.
Yeah,
the foundational concepts is one thing, but just
how many geologists have I been out in the field with in the last 30 years? I have to have been 24.
at least.
If I go out with a geologist in the field for 2 or 3 days or a day, whatever, I I figure, and most likely they've written some papers that I've already read multiple times. So I'm out there with them. How is that any less valuable than sitting in a room listening to a lecture with 50 other students sitting there? Could be the same geologist.
That's right.
But that's the point, is that, yeah, I mean, I've been in a classroom of geology.
Dan, did you ever take a geology class?
At the institution.
Not that that's your main thing. Did you take any history? What
I
did you?
took some history. I took an archaeology class. I took more psychology classes than anything else. That's why, I mean, psychology is still. I'll babble about this forever, even though psychology is like the softest of all sciences, because I mean, you know,
It's archaeology.
Well, even archaeology. I mean, your Epsteins don't report
Well,
don't report their problems, right? So your psychologists have some pretty fucking skewed data. It's all self-reported for the most part.
Right.
So, but it's also the keen of all sciences, because every scientific discipline that you look at, if you don't think psychology as you look at that, if you don't, you at least use that as one of the lenses to evaluate it, you're going to miss some like really obvious stuff. Like, for example, archaeology, because it's got such a hard on to prove that it's a science, and its origins say that it's not a science. It's a bunch of fucking collectors trying to catalog their wares, a bunch of thieving ass collectors, no less. You see them trying extra hard to shore up anything. So when they have, like, everybody knows the Clovis first debacle, but most people don't know that in the 30s and 40s, this dude named Ailes Hydrica was doing the exact same fucking thing.
Oh, he was an awful person. That Dricla?
Yeah. With Folsom first.
Awful human being.
He would do the exact same thing, and now we have that same. Okay, freaking the Kon-Tiki stuff. Thor Heyerdahl faced that with the whole idea that Easter Island, and talk about stupid. I mean, the idea that people could find Easter Island by boat, but they couldn't have found South America after that. That's like mouth breathing levels of stupid. But this is what they tried to pawn off and use as a stick to beat. Anyway, my point is that you can easily see the issues. And for example, like I brought up this paper earlier, these guys are clearly doctoring, like if you know about the carbon dating of the Great Pyramid and the Fourth Dynasty on the Giza Plateau, when they carbon dated all that stuff, it was like 250, 150, as much as 400 years off. And so this has been a serious problem, because that doesn't exist throughout all of Egyptology. It's just this, like the end of the third and the fourth and the beginning of the fifth dynasty. So they've done all these things to try to explain that away. And the best one here is this Bayesian inference paper that I made sure to bring up. Can one of you bring up some of those things here?
Oh, well, I got to bring a picture of this.
Oh yeah. ALC sucks.
I mean, what an absolute! I can't see my whole screen now. Can y'all see that?
Award.
Yeah.
He won a Huxley, by the way, which is like the prestigious archaeology medal.
Prick. And I wish I had some excerpts of what a prick the guy was, but he said what. So look at that. Pioneer in the field, first curator of physical anthropology of the Smithsonian from 04 to 41. So think of the intellectual cue-giving power you would have as the Smithsonian's just getting, building its reputation. I mean, he was running things.
There's no people in the Americas before about 3,000 years ago was his position.
That's right. And it stuck with us. If you have someone in that kind of position long enough, it is going to influence generations of people to come.
Well, it just becomes the face of archaeology in those regards. And it's really sad, because if you look at just before that, when you had the founding of the Society for American Archaeology, in their constitution, like their very first bylaw, it talks about how the whole goal of this organization is to like basically make an olive branch between the amateurs and the professionals, and to offer assistance when asked. And it's real clear. It's like a PR thing. And so Society for American Archaeology could have picked up with the origins of their own organization. Instead, they followed Ailes, and now they're all the Flint Dibbles and the freaking what's that other guy's name? The clown from Kansas University, John Hoops, that guy.
Yeah, John Hoops.
But yeah, for that paper that I brought up, they've doctored this one entirely. They've used very easily.
What's the name of that paper? I'll call it up if it's.
I've got in these images that I've got down there. These retracts.
Oh, okay, yeah. Let me put them up. I'm going to put that up.
From right, yeah. That's one of the quotes in there. Okay, so we're talking about an issue where, say, the Great Pyramid is supposed to have been made in like 4,600 years ago, and the dating is saying it was made 4,800 years ago. So for this analysis, they used the completion date of construction was deemed the most suitable parameter. So they prioritized the completion date. So it's right off the bat, they're taking the latest possible date and giving that a higher priority than the carbon dating. They're doing this with the written records. So they're going to do this with Bayesian inference, which is a mathematical formula. So if you've got a 200-year discrepancy and then you're fudging away a lot of it before you've even done the math. But then if you check,
this is from a pyramids paper.
This is from, yeah, if you click, there's the other one there. It's like the carbon dating. Sorry, that's the other quote. Yeah. And look at that one. The samples that could not be ascribed to a given king's reign were omitted. So you're looking at carbon dating samples that are anomalous. And so it's like, oh, it doesn't line up with any of the pharaohs. I will just throw this guy out. Because they're going to use the King's list as prior information, which is basically the way Bayesian inference works. You have prior information, new data. The new data basically modifies your prior information, but your prior information is going to be close to stable unless you have some seriously strong new data. And basically the whole point of this paper is to eliminate it. So before they even did the math, they had already, we'll get rid of these numbers. We'll get rid of these numbers. Now we'll do the math. And oh, look, that 200-year, 300, 400-year bump, it's gone. There's no problem here anymore, boys. Problem solved.
Randall's anomalous variable or stranded variable.
Yes, it does. And in addition, I'll tell you what's really fucked up.
Lurking variable.
The thing that's really messed up about this to me is the carbon dating, famously, the carbon dating of the Great Pyramid in the Giza Plateau was financed by the Edgar Cayce Foundation and by David Koch. So the Edgar Cayce Foundation and David Koch both wanted these old ass dates. They're looking for 10,500 BC. So they don't get that, but they get, a few hundred years older than it should be. So they get something. Mm-hmm. And the guys that they paid erase it. So I brought this up on Twitter the other day. It's like, and in my latest video, it's like, so every time somebody's like, hey, Graham, why don't you take your billions of dollars and hire a submarine and some archaeologists to go figure out all of this stuff that you want to do? It's like, what? Like the Edgar Cayce Foundation did? So you guys can fucking massage the data away when you do find something? Fuck you. This is a joke. It's gross. I mean,
it's in keeping with what I've heard from the Comet Research Group, just through the years, that archaeology often does that you come up with a bunch of dates and you the first thing you do is take all the confusing ones and the ones that don't fit the narrative. And, there's some balance. I wouldn't think it depends on how much of that you do. And I don't think they're doing statistical determinations to necessarily figure it out, but they'll take out the trash.
That's right.
The stuff that is actually indicative of a need for a paradigm change.
But Flint Dibble on Joe Rogan in front of millions of people said that the pyramids were dated confidently through carbon dating when they were not. The carbon dating has been ignored, massaged away. The pyramids are carbon dated 200 to 400 years older than the written records, and they have massaged that away and they ignore that. So,
Randall, do you believe the pyramids themselves are older than the accepted date?
Well, if we look at this recent research, which I probably should pull up and we should take a quick look at it. I'm going to do a more
bring up anything you like on any subject, buddy. This is
do an in-depth report on this, but this will give you the idea. This is using the relative erosion method.
Oh gosh, yeah, what a great paper. Thanks for bringing the subject up.
Yeah.
So do you want some pointers there? Just hit the plus inside the TV screen.
Go ahead and play this. I think I'll put it into presentation mode, and then I will go down here to share.
This is not your first radio, but take your time.
Yeah, I'm getting it right here. This will only take a second.
That's what I said on my honeymoon.
I'm
single now.
Enjoy a fine Coors Light.
Here we go. All right. Allow. You should now be seeing this. The preliminary report on the The dating of the Khufu.
Hold on just a sec. Hold on. I got to add you to the stage.
Oh, yeah.
Boom. There you go.
Okay. So here we go. This is the relative erosion method, and this is only a small part of the paper. Let's get into it.
That's why it gets right to what Dan was talking about.
Let's see what we're interested in here. The particular agents of rock erosion that we would be interested here would be primarily water, surface runoff, and let's see, gravity, of course. But let's see, slightly acidic rainwater, probably an important component. Rainfall, quite a bit of rainfall. So what it does to carbonate rocks is it causes this pitting, P-I-T-T-I-N-G, over time. And the density of the pits and the depth of the pits are going to be a function of the time it's exposed to the atmosphere, given a particular regime of rainfall, particular pluvial regime of rainfall, right? Now, at present, Giza Plateau is arid, so there's very little rainfall. So this pitting that you see here is not going to be something that happens quickly, right? In fact, it's probably not going to happen hardly at all. This is indication. Now, this is a photograph. Let's go here. There. Okay, so if we look at this, there was the earthquake there about 675 years ago is the estimate. That's the date that Danini uses, and that's based upon the fact that they've dated this earthquake whose epicenter was up near Crete, and it happened 675 years ago. And up until this point, the outer surface of the pyramid was entirely impenetrable because of the fact that the joinery was so tight. You couldn't even, it was seamless, right? But this earthquake loosened a few blocks, but it also flattened a lot of the buildings in Cairo. So here's what it did. They could now pry some of the casing stones loose. At the same time, there was this sudden huge demand for building stones in Cairo. So somebody had the brilliant idea that, hey, we can just strip these stones off of the pier. So for thousands of years, this thing stood like a pristine, white, gleaming monument. And then only 675 years ago, it was stripped. But what you see here is the remnant of the casing stones. Now, here's the point. If you look at areas of the base of the pyramid that have not been covered by stone, like where my cursor is right here, this has been exposed to the atmosphere since the date it was constructed. Over here, this was under the casing stone.
Sure. Okay.
Got it?
Yeah.
So now you remove the casing stone, and erosion then can begin to work on the base here at whatever date the casing stone is removed. So 675 years ago is the assumed date, the date of this earthquake that caused the fracturing of the casing stone perimeter of the pyramid. So now this area out here and in other areas of exposed base of the pyramid there is been exposed basically since it was constructed. So now, however, so let's take the conventional date, 4,600 years ago. So this area here has been sitting out in the weather for 4,600 years.
Okay.
This is 675 years.
Yeah.
So you would assume then that there's going to be differential in the amount of weathering, and there is. Okay. So if we go back to here, you can see side by side, smooth part under the casing stone, rough, deeply pitted is outside the casing stone. Now, there's virtually no pitting in the area that's been exposed for 675 years, but there's extensive pitting in the stone that has been exposed. Now, you can now look, and so what he has done,
it has been exposed forever.
It's been exposed since the pyramid
since the beginning. Gotcha.
Since the pyramid was built.
Okay, so in 675 years, all you could do on the left.
You don't see much of anything.
Right. Okay. But over on the
right over here, you see this.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did it take for this to occur? Well, that's going to be a function of how much rainfall, for one thing. If it's an arid environment like now, it's going to take forever. In fact, you're not going to get this. This is coming from incessant rainfall, right? So you have to look at a much wetter regime, right? When do we go back for that? Well, you'd have to go back at least 7 to 10,000 years for that. But is that even enough to produce this degree of weather?
Really? Okay.
And so what he did was he has an
Yeah, just so people know that Egypt was green and lush and plenty of rainfall going back 7,000 years ago, pre-dynastic, before the pyramids.
That's right.
Supposedly. Supposedly.
Yes. Let's see. Is this it? So the point being is that he did this analysis, and I've read the paper once. I'm reading it again, but he's counted the number here and the depth, and he has then created an equation. It's based on a simple ratio, and the ratio is he's got a parameter, a variable, or a coefficient for erosion. For depth, and for the number, the density of these things, right? And then he plugs in the ratio. He'll look at this that's been under the casing stones and say, here in 675 years, this is how much erosion we've got. How many years to get this amount of erosion? And here's another photograph. Would have been under the casing stone. Here's outside the casing stone. So he did this, developed a number of dates, and they ranged between, say, 10,000 years and 40,000 years.
By estimating the time of the known period it was exposed.
Yes, which is your baseline. And now you can look at the other and you can say, okay, this has been exposed. How long would it take? So by playing with different regimes of rainfall is one issue that you would enter into your equation. But the result is that he was coming up with minimums of like 10,000 years, maximums of 40,000 years. He took his...
Where was it published, Randall?
Well, let's see. It's published in...
Pretty recent, wasn't it?
It's published in the, preliminary report on the absolute dating of the Khufu pyramid using the relative erosion method.
And who is the researcher? I mean, I love him already, but I'm just
Italian dude.
Alberto Donini, Italian engineer. I'm trying to see where it was published.
I saw this not too long ago. It's pretty interesting stuff. So yeah, it is. I don't think it's peer reviewed, but I think it is published. I don't think it's
right. Well, it's
pretty interesting.
I don't need to be peer reviewed as long as it looks.
Oh no. It's just it is a bar that a lot of people think
it helps. See, that's why I always check on these credentials. It's not like it's going to make a whole lot of difference to me, but it's what it's going to mean to the public, to the press, such that there's still a press.
Well, that's why they should honestly be retracting that paper that I brought up. Sorry to circle back to it, but that paper should be retracted in all honesty, because it clearly violates the whole intention of it's. I mean, if we sat down and I said that you owe me $20 and you say that I owe you $10, and then we do some mathematical equation and we fudge everything towards you owe me $20, at the end of the day you're going to owe me $20 or $19.80. So it's clearly a bullshit paper and should be retracted, but because it's in the right, it's on the right side of the fence, it won't be.
Well, Randall, finish up. Where are you heading, man?
Well, where I'm headed is that you cannot attribute this. None of the dates come up even close to, one of the, again, an outlying date. And it may have had another reason why it was sheltered or something. If he did analysis, I think, of 11 different spots around the pyramid, and he shows that in his paper. This is the paper right here. Let's see. He's got the
with us. Excuse me. Each having a similar differentiation between older and new, the same situation.
This is there was a wide range of variability. That's what I'm saying. The youngest was like a little bit less than 10,000 years, I believe it was. I need to reread the paper, but the oldest was close to 40,000 years. So he takes as the mean of those 25,000 years.
Right. Because this is a rough methodology, but it does demonstrate that it's half an order of magnitude older than it should be.
Oh yeah, I mean it could be 20,000 years old or older. Yeah, so he breaks it down. I don't know if you can't see this really.
And Dan,
Once I stop sharing, I'll. In fact, I will stop sharing right now because I've got some other things to share if we want to look at them. Let's see. He says here in conclusion, he says that, let's see. Criteria for selecting the analyzed points. So he had 11 points around the pyramid that he analyzed, where he compared the 675-year baseline to an area that would have presumably been open to the weather since the pyramid was built. But of course, then the variables are, well, were each of these points exposed to the weather to the same extent? Well, he doesn't know. However, the assumption is that probably if you have enough points and they're from 11 different places around the pyramid, you're going to be able to get a ballpark figure. And that, like he says, that's really all he's looking for.
Well, some of the erosion on the temple at the top of the causeway is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, the rocks up there, I mean, it's not, you wouldn't call it, it's just somebody moved some gigantic rocks there that are just shadows of their former self.
Right.
I mean, it seem even older, right? Where they're just mangled things. Like, why is this up here? Clearly, when someone put it here, it was beautiful and symmetrical and whatnot. And now they're these ugly, gnarly beasts. You know, like,
Right.
how the hell long did David, Ben Van Carker, Ben's done a good job showing that. It's like, how the hell did this stuff show up? It looks older than the Valley Temple. It looks older than the pyramid. It's like anomalous, clearly highly eroded material.
So here in his concluding remarks, George,
Yes, sir.
he says he intends to continue his research and invites archaeologists from around the world to collaborate in future studies. Relative erosion method is not intended to determine a precise construction date for an ancient building. Rather, it identifies a temporal interval and assigns a probability to it. Although the resulting date ranges are wide, the conclusions indicate a low probability for the official archaeological dating of 2,500.
Well put. Yeah, that's hedged, or not hedged, but
right. For these reasons, it is likely that the pyramids of Akhet Khufu date back to approximately 23,000 BC.
Mm-hmm.
It is therefore plausible that the pharaoh Cheops merely renovated the Khufu pyramid, attributing its authorship to themselves.
I love the. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, on the basis of the preliminary report on relative erosion measurements carried out on the Khufu pyramid, it can be concluded that around 20,000 years ago, 20,000 years before Christ, there existed a civilization in Egypt capable of constructing at least the Khufu pyramid. Now, if that turns out to be true, that turns out to be, and I would like to see independent studies. I mean, I do know this. I've studied quite a bit into rock erosion, particularly limestone. You know, I spent several months pursuing and studying rock erosion before I went to Egypt, so I could see the Sphinx itself. And what I realized was the Sphinx itself is not the thing to really look at. The thing to look at is the quarry walls around it, because there's been all these restoration campaigns on the Sphinx, so you're not quite sure what you're looking at there, but you know that the walls are in their essentially their pristine condition.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you see the evidence of, to me, it's indisputably sheet flooding.
Yeah, that's
imprinted on those walls.
Yeah, I think personally, I think that whole area was sacred for a very long time. Like, if you go back to the Green Sahara period, the Sphinx would have been quite frequently up to this much water to wade up to the outcrop of rock. You would almost be in an island of water. Like, the outcrop of rock would be an island of water put an island sticking out of the water. An
so
island
an infinity pool as you looked out from the Sphinx. Yeah.
Well, check it out. I mean, if you know much about Egyptian mythology, if you got this outcrop of rock that's naturally lined up to the rising sun, and it's coming right out of the water, this sounds an awful lot like that original primeval mound, this original Ben stone. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's where the Ben stone was a piece of rock chipped off of this fucking thing, and it was used around it. I think that the Sphinx enclosure itself was, let's put it this way. If this area is supposed to be water primeval mound coming up, and then the desert starts drying out, they're going to dig an enclosure around that just to keep it full of water, to keep it symbolic representation. So that would explain why this enclosure would predate potentially any of the other symbols. It could have been just a chunk of rock coming up that they kept digging out. So even the I think the pyramids were laid out quite a long time ago along the same lines. It's an interesting thing. Like the Howard Weiss expedition is always my favorite anomaly, because it's got two things that neither side of the alternate history or mainstream history debate likes to face. One thing is the iron plate of smelted iron in the Bronze Age Great Pyramid. How the fuck did that get there? Boy, the mainstream historians don't like that. But there's also a cartouche of Khufu, and well, the alternate historians don't like that one either. But there is a cartouche of Khufu in a fairly hard to reach spot. There's actually the writings inside.
A lot of iron in the pyramid upset the alternative researchers.
Well, it upset the mainstream guys more than anything else, because it's a Bronze Age edifice.
I misunderstood.
No, you're fine. It actually makes me laugh a lot, because the Howard Weiss expedition, you'll get the same exact excuse. If you ask a historian why that expedition had found an iron plate, a lot of them will say, well, they were under the gun, getting close to running out of funding, running out of time. They had to find something. So finding an iron plate, that's a pretty good find. And then you ask an alternate historian what's up with that Khufu cartouche, and you get the same answer. Well, they're running out of time, and you need to find something, so you just slap a little cartouche up there. Honestly, though, the big one to me is the ones inside of the writings inside of the Queen's Chamber shaft that they saw with the robot. It's like that proves at least a huge fucking chunk of that pyramid was built in dynastic times. But again, I don't think that area was just something that in the Fourth Dynasty they picked up. And I think that area was sacred for a long time. And I think the fact that you see all of this stuff shuffled into that little wedge, the little fertile crescent that they've got, the little fertile pyramid that they've got there in the Delta. I think during that Green Sahara, I think that whole part of the world I think the whole damn world was a lot smarter 15, 20,000 years ago than we give it credit for. But I think that Egypt is kind of a smoking gun for the consolidation and distillation of all that knowledge into a small area.
But let's set a little, the timelines get confusing for people. And of course, we don't know what the timelines were. It's all speculation supported by data that didn't necessarily always reach the same conclusion like Randall's paper did. But what we're saying here, or what you two are suggesting, is that the pyramid sometimes I would think get interpreted by our crowd as being some type of memorial or protection mechanism from the great catastrophe 12,000 years ago. But what you're saying is that the pyramids predated the catastrophe by close to 10,000 years. So the pyramids would have survived the catastrophe that we know is the Younger Dryas event.
Yeah, I think that's what Randall's saying. I'm more of the opinion that area was. I think that the pyramids were laid out a very long time ago. I think I think they were sacred for a very. I think that whole chunk, that whole Robert Bauval, Leo, Nile, Orion with the pyramids. I think that's old as fuck, and I just think that over time, as different rulers gained the ability to see their vision through, that they invested more and more and more into it.
Yeah, you're kind of where Luke Caverns is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that stuff that's I think there's a lot of that stuff. I think that that's why Sneferu has 3 pyramids. I think that there was a deleted dynasty there. I think they did to somebody what they did to King Tut. They just kind of erased a few. That's why we've got this disparity in the carbon dating by 100, 200, 300 years. And I think that I personally think that Snefru came in there for whatever reason. He raced the people before, and then he was like, you can't have them being the ones that made the first cool pyramid.
Hey, have you heard of Lance Weaver, who is a geologist in Utah? Dan?
The name is familiar, but I can't.
Yeah, look into his stuff. I'll put y'all directly in touch. He's looking for help. He believes there's a missing 300 to 500 years as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Randall, you got any opinion on missing Egyptian history? Do you think they got it right?
Yeah, no, I'm not. I don't have an opinion on that. I could come down on either side of that because I just don't have enough data to go on. I guess I'm looking at more the archaic history of Egypt is what I guess I focus more on and been interested in is, the pre-dynastic period of history, the prior to the Old Kingdom. What led up to the Old Kingdom? Well, I think we have to go back. The geological evidence suggests that there was extraordinary floods down the Nile, depositing huge volumes of sediment into the eastern Mediterranean during roughly younger Dryas times. And I think the dating hasn't been accurate enough because most of the dating has been from core samples taken in the eastern Mediterranean off of this debris fan that spans out. The Nile Delta continues on into the eastern Mediterranean. In fact, most of the Nile Delta is submerged. Well, if you go in and they've taken core samples, and what the core samples show is that there have been these episodes of extreme flooding down the Nile, where the water levels are looking to be 120, maybe 150 feet above the modern floodplain, which would submerge the Giza Plateau to a large extent. Now, what role did that play in the erosion of the Sphinx? I don't know. I think that the erosion of the Sphinx is probably the result of a series of episodes, again, going back, I would say, to me, the numbers I was thinking in terms of, like the Great Year, the precessional cycle, I was kind of thinking that maybe that would be a date that we could hone in on for the first appearance of major civilizations along the Nile Valley, which of course was 26,000 years ago, roughly, give or take a millennia or two here or there. Interestingly, what I just read was that Donini then places it at 23,000 BC or 25,000 BP, which is almost in that window. That is taking the mean value of 11 different dates that he got. But it kind of points that there's a probability that could be a higher. There in the bell curve, that pretty much 25,000 year period seems to come along at the peak of the bell curve. So that would make sense. So that's totally consistent with my conception. That's kind of where I figured that the Sphinx dated to. I also considered that the Sphinx was probably multiple episodes of erosion over 25,000 years, that we're not looking at just one episode of erosion, highly erosive floods submerging that area of the plateau, but possibly two or three.
Well, most erosion is caused by episodic events, and you and I have discussed that historically. That it's not the big storms do a lot more to form the earth than the small stuff.
Yes, in fact, the
right. All you have to have is one big storm that sets a new standard for what the river valley looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Hey, let me take this opportunity to plug my friend Trevor Grossi, and their group who are investigating Aurora.
I saw Trevor at the Cosmic Summit and up in New York here a few months ago.
Yeah, no, he's a great addition to the team, man. and he's got a wonderful group, and of course it extends into Ben Van Kerkwyk, and it's all the investigation of Hawara, right? And I'm going to add their new website here that people should investigate. So if you're curious about it, go to it's archaeologicalrescue.org, and it's the Archaeological Rescue Foundation, which has a nice little acronym ARF that they have just set up. And they have a very, very detailed plan and backstory to why Aurora, I just can't do it, Aurora, should be investigated. And it's getting, what I'm getting to though, is it's getting very, very close, man. I think they've gained the trust of the government to some degree, it seems. They are not banned from the country by far, and they have the right contacts and attitude and the proper respectful research plan to finally go look for the labyrinth. Closer than we think.
Yeah, okay,
yeah, this is a great website, folks. I mean, it's got all of Trevor's own stuff. It's got a Louis de Cordier who did the original GPR work out there that I believe was covered up with, a non-disclosure agreement and whatnot. All of this is some of it's old data, but newly revealed that there is a tremendous complex in front of the pyramid there down in Fayum. And I've been out there. I'm not going to be so vain to pop up my own photos, but I took a bunch of great ones, and it's an incredible place. And and it said, everybody from Herodotus to Pliny the Elder, et cetera, and so forth, said that it was far more expansive and impressive than the pyramids themselves. A lot of the people listening are probably somewhat familiar with this story, but what I'm trying to say is it's moving along. We may actually make some progress here, right? And I'm talking in coming months. I don't know a whole lot about it. I love these scans. Look at that. I mean, don't tell me that under that sand where you see that blue there, that stuff that I was walking on top of when I was over there, that there was no visible, that is looking beneath the earth in a shallow sense. And you can see very clearly that there are things down there. Well, good gosh. I mean, the earth, the globe, humanity needs to know what in the world is down there. If described by our most respected and commonly known elder historians as being legit in the extreme, and that it's more impressive than what most impress us, which is the pyramids, we got to get in there. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to pitch that. They're raising money. If there happens to be one of those angels out there that could assist, this is not vastly expensive work. You're gonna have to.
It's not like saving an archaeologist, so don't think it's like some archaeologist like pet rescue kind of thing. You're not going to be giving the money to Flint Dibble. It's going to be going to real researchers.
That's right. That's right. And that goes for the Comet Research Group as well, which the donations there, the money goes it's not even comparable. The money given to the Comet Research Group, every last penny goes into paying for testing samples and stuff like that. And I know for a fact, you give that money to Trevor Grassi, that guy could live on $5 a week.
Oh, yeah.
He is no grifter. I mean, he'll sleep in a dump in Giza with his head on a backpack for a week just to literally get to the bottom of it.
Yep, that's
and
right.
I had a tremendous amount of respect for him. So I just wanted to pimp their game a little bit.
Yeah, when I met him up in Woodstock, and he was just like that. He knew all the cool places to go and everything else. But yeah, that dude could, like you say, $5, he'd be just fine. Fine.
That's right. No, he ain't in it for the money, brother.
No,
and if you give him some, or his foundation, or excuse me, him and others, this money is well used. It goes straight to the ground. And of course, if it was a big number, you could have direct involvement and direct oversight of it. And
they face some serious opposition too. I mean, like I was bitching about that paper a minute ago, needing retracted, and the Comet Research Group, it's all the time having papers get retracted that for no real reason except for they disagree with the end result. I mean, it's not like they don't really get them on anything that's bad as far as like the whole a paper that's peer reviewed. I mean, a lot of people think that the point of a peer reviewing of a paper is to like determine if it's right or not, and that's not the point. Is to determine if it followed the procedure properly.
That's right.
It can be pissing up a rope as long as it pisses in the right direction and does it properly. It's fine. It'll pass peer review. So if it's when these papers get retracted, it's insidious because they're implying that these guys don't know how to see science. They don't know how to do their fucking job, basically. And I mean, in the white collar world, you just get yelled at, man. I'm a blue collar guy. That's the kind of shit gets you met outside of a bar. And it's, you don't tell somebody they can't do their job.
To your point, and my website, this page was just fine last night, and it is messed up today. Oh, there we go. If you go to cosmictusk.com, 2 papers were retracted in the last 2 weeks. 2 Comet Research Group papers were fully retracted from PLOS 1, PLOS 1, which we've all heard of, which is a open, open archive. And they retracted them because the critics of the Comet Research Group, of which there is a well-known cabal, it's not well-known. You do not know who is coming in and criticizing you after the fact. But they raised a bunch of truly nuisance complaints about these papers, pestered the editors, relentlessly until they relented. And they retracted both papers, which were fine science. And there's a term that you might have heard in politics. The current administration in its previous iteration went through it, where it's called process crimes, where you didn't really commit a crime. You filled the paperwork out wrong or whatever. It's a process that you violated, and some federal statutes attach sentences to that stuff. And normally you get out of it because there was no victim to it. It's the exact same dynamic here, where you're using the rules in the most extreme way to make information go away. And that's what they did here. So it ain't gone anywhere. They still got to keep them up on the websites. At least they have traditionally. So I've always thought it's kind of funny. You retract it, but you leave it up there. I mean, what's more sexy to read than a paper that's got a big old banner that says retracted on it? I mean, that's what draws eyeballs. So everybody go out and look at these, and you can find them at Comet Research Group, and I detail in the blog post what the problems, as stated in the retraction petitions, were, and how they just don't amount to much. But that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with the perversion of science to maintain the current paradigm by a bunch of lunatics, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, one of the first big things that they hammered away at against the Comet Research Group was the missing data set on the Greenland paper about the nanodiamonds, right? And they're like, there's supposed to be a data set that was supposed to have been archived in the National Snow and Ice Data Center. This data set's not in the National Snow and Ice Data Center. You guys are pulling some cheeky bullshit. So I contacted the National Snow and Ice Data Center. They ain't got it. I look around and stuff. They ain't got it. But when you look around, you see that all they would have is the numbers and the paper that it's published in the Journal of Glaciation. And the paper hasn't been retracted, despite them trying numerous times to get it retracted, because the Journal of Glaciation saw those numbers. They know that they're accurate. It's just that for somewhere between point A and point B, it didn't end up in this data archive. So Mark Boslow goes around and makes it sound like they withheld samples. They didn't give out the samples to the National Snow and Ice Data Center. Fuck you. They didn't give them numbers, dickhead. They didn't send them some zeros and ones. That's it. But but if you sell these things, if you make it sound like they wouldn't provide samples, well, now all of a sudden that's a bad scientist. He's hiding something.
It's spin, and Boslow's good at it. Not that anybody listens to him, but about probably 150 people who say, "Hey, it ain't worth going and taking the other side of Mark because he's so loud. I'll just let this thing simmer, and just stay out of the mix."
Yeah, he sucks.
Yeah, he does suck. And incidentally, I was on the Michael Shermer's podcast. No, excuse me. Michael Shermer was on mine. I wasn't so honored. And, he's America's skeptic and founded the Skeptic Society, or at least was, early member and whatnot after James Randi, and publisher of Skeptic Magazine. And I had him on the Cosmic Tusk. And Boslow sent in, I tweeted it the night before that I was having Shermer on. And then in the middle of the recording, Shermer tells me that Mark Boslow that morning, so within a matter of hours, had texted him some questions for me as a civilian pajama scientist, ball boy member of the Comet Research Group. And they were nonsensical questions. Clearly he had been drinking or gotten up very, very early and not gotten his sleep. So he sent in these oddball questions that, didn't take me back, but I'm like, I can't answer that. It's like, it was none of these, where is this sample stuff? Where are Andrew Moore's samples from Abu Huraira? Why can't we investigate them? And it was complete nuisance stuff, but it derailed the podcast. It turned the interviewee into the interviewer, which was kind of fine with me. That's fine. Point is, then Shermer says, you come on with Boslow and come on my show and let's work this out and just get you both here in person. I said, damn right I will. I'm happy to go get on the show with Mark Boslow. I think it'd be fantastic. Let's rumble or let's keep it responsible, whatever. Let's air the disagreements. And Boslow took a dive.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Those guys. Those guys are all afraid to do.
He said his current day job, and I know he's retired, so apparently, I guess he's suggesting he's got some kind of stint going on that would prevent him, from having. And I tell you, whenever somebody says they don't have enough time for a podcast, something else is going on. Anybody can carve 2 hours out of their fucking life.
Well, and especially,
come on,
inserting himself in the process by trying to coach Shermer in how to try to debunk you, I guess. So look, dude, you've got an iron in the fire here, dude. It's not like you're just passively sitting out on the sidelines. You're injecting yourself in.
He injected himself in the thing,
exactly.
And then you said, let's discuss it, together in a common forum instead of just shooting things over the transom like he did. And he takes a dive, and what he does, he passes it off to our antagonist and equal antagonist, Scott Harris, Randall.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Dr. Scott Harris?
Well, yes.
And just to lay a little bit.
Well, yes.
Boslow suggests, okay, because he's so busy that Scott Harris should appear in his stead. And I damn thing pissed me off so bad. This kind of stuff.
You just send me in your stead, George. I'm busy too. I'm busy
you and
too.
Scott go at it, but that's what I'm going to do, and I need to do it. I sent Shermer one respectful email. I forget exactly what I said, and said, okay, this is typical guy. But if he says he's busy till spring, I can wait till spring. Come on, Mark. Let's just put it on the calendar for May 22nd. I don't care. Do you have a free day? Excuse me. Do you have a free hour, Mark Boslow, to join me on the Michael Shermer podcast, and let's just have a talk about it. We've been jousting for 17 years. You blocked me for 16.9 of the years, and now you won't engage me as a representative, a poor representative, but a representative of the Comet Research Group. You're unwilling to engage them in a discussion after almost 2 decades of throwing tomatoes, making literally scurrilous accusations of suggestions of fraud. And it's time for you to just go on camera and speak to someone who disagrees with you, Mark. It's not that difficult. We do it all the time. These two don't even agree on things, right?
The difference.
So
I think what's one of the biggest strengths that we have actually in the alternate history community is that by not agreeing with each other on everything, and by not forcing that environment where you feel pressured to agree with each other on everything, we allow ourselves the ability to really investigate things from all different avenues, and to really just peel in all different kinds of ideas and stuff. It's sad. Like I came up with that crap for the Baghdad battery recently, where I think it was not used for electricity, it was used to extract metal from like mine runoff, right? Like it was a way for, if you put in gold runoff from a medieval mine, and you put it in one of those Baghdad batteries and came back in a week, the copper part would be coated in gold and the bottom part would be filled with sludge, and the iron part that's in the battery would have eroded some, so it would look like alchemy. And so I think that's what these are for. And it's been 100 years, and I'm not the first person to look at this that understands how a galvanic cell works, but I'm probably the first person that looked at it that wasn't hell-bent on proving it had electricity, or hell-bent on proving that it didn't have electricity. And that's fucked. It's been 100 years people have been talking about this thing. And I'm not saying that Randall's the first guy to talk about the tensile strength of ice in the Lake Missoula, and it's been a thing for almost 100 years. It's stupid that it's not stupid. It's just it's indicative of how pathetic this whole polarized bullshit is, but how awesome it is to be in the alternate history side of things. We end up with real answers to real questions, where these guys are stagnating and trying to catch up with us. Hell, they just published this paper that came out today talking about the beginnings of written language in this Aurignacian artifact that I covered a month and a half ago, talking about it being the origins of written language. And it's like, it's these, I mean, and I'm not alone, right? It's these guys, I'm not saying we're necessarily ahead of them in all ways, but we are definitely ahead of them in our ability to accept a new hypothesis.
I had to call up his dive here. I've got deep commitments associated with my day job for the next couple of months. Well, if it's a day job, you can join us at night, and wouldn't be able to do anything like this until spring. I just called Scott Harris to see if he can do it in case you need a YDIH skeptic on your podcast as soon as March. He has agreed and is available on these dates. So he didn't even bother to say, I can, after March, appear on the podcast, et cetera and so forth. And then he goes and, uses Scott to smear the YDIH. But Randall, you had an interaction with Scott, and let's close it with this. What has been your experience with Dr. Scott Harris?
Well, let's see. So I had maybe 7 or 8 years ago been invited to do a presentation at the Atlanta Geological Society, and which I prepared a talk. I went there and I gave a great slideshow, and I recorded the whole thing. It's online somewhere. I think it's in the archives of the Atlanta Geological Society, because I actually did look it up. So then I got invited back. I had a couple of geologists who were on one of my tours up in the.
So it wasn't 6 or 7 years ago. That was the first time.
The first one, yes.
Got
And it came off. It was smooth. It was fun. I think people enjoyed it. They had one of the biggest crowds they'd ever had, because I probably brought 15 or 20 people who came to hear my lecture, who weren't normally members of the Geological Society.
Right.
Well, then I got invited again by the president, who used to be my professor of when I was taking geology courses, and she gave me the glow. I went in there. I prepared. They said I have 1 hour, so I prepared a 1 hour presentation, and I was going to present material, opening up some of the questions and the dialogue about the Missoula floods, the possible connection between the Missoula floods. When I'm calling them Missoula floods, although I'm changing the name of those floods to Cordilleran floods, by the way, but. And its possible connection to some of the ideas of the younger Dryas. And the way I was going to approach that was that I was going to talk about the energy paradox that was first realized in the early 70s, when 20 years of radiocarbon dates had accumulated, and the whole deglacial phase of the disappearance of the late Wisconsin ice mass was way faster than anybody had imagined. So what they were doing was they were considering, okay, what kind of energy requirements are necessary to complete the entire deglaciation process in 10,000 years or less. And what they came up with is that when it was straight physics, how many units of heat have to be introduced to the ice to melt the volume of ice that comprised the whole North American ice complex, which was probably close to around 6 million cubic miles of ice. That's a whole lot of ice. Just think of 1 cubic mile. Think of an ice cube that's a mile high, a mile wide, and a mile deep. Now you got 6 million of those things that have to get melted away, right? So it requires an energy input. And the energy input had to come from somewhere. So where was it? I wanted to raise that question and open my talk by that question. And so I pointed out that what they did back they had 2 conferences.
It's just a question.
Yeah.
It's just a damn question with no answer.
No, there was an answer to some extent. There was a conference in 73 and a conference in 75. So they looked at it, and I won't get into that. I have a whole presentation I have put together on this. In fact, I had an iteration of that presentation that I had put together specifically for this 1 hour talk. So I'm trying to introduce this idea that there was an energy paradox. It was left unresolved because what they realized was that the greatest extent of thermal energy available anywhere on Earth was not even 1/3 of the energy required to cause the disappearance of the great ice complex. And of course, in their models, they didn't assume that there was pulsed melting in 73 and 75. They were looking at a smooth continuum of melting that essentially followed that bell curve, right? and it goes up, it peaks out somewhere around the middle of the process, and then it tapers off with a long tail that lasted until about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago. But the point is that it required, in other words, if it was 10,000 years over that smooth continuum of whatever the energy source was to melt away 6 million cubic miles of ice, there's no place on Earth today where that ice would melt in less than 30,000 years.
Right.
That
a
was
lot of heat doesn't do much good for a lot of ice.
This was these two conferences. So I was going to open the talk with these by citing the history of this and how it essentially has been unresolved since then, right? Well, I got into about 15 minutes of it where I'm discussing these papers, and I have screenshots, screen captures of some of the papers. I have some quotes, salient quotes about their conclusions. So before we start, okay, so that was the context. I had a 1 hour talk. I rehearsed it. I put it together. They said you could have a 1 hour talk. I come in there with Mike Waslevek, who was normal guy on the Cosmographia podcast, and he's a retired videographer for CNN. Yeah. So he had recorded the first one we did, right, without any problem. He now sets up back of the audience, back of the auditorium. He's all set up, you know, to record the thing. Scott Harris sends some guy over to tell him he's not allowed to record.
Okay.
So that wasn't actually the first thing. The first thing was when I came in, somebody introduced me to the vice president of the Geological Society. And so I was very friendly and said, hey, I noticed something right immediately that I noticed. I went very friendly. He was at a table. I walked over and I put out my hand. He shook my hand, but he never looked me in the eye. I noticed that right from me. I know that guy didn't look me in the eye. I was introduced to him and he didn't look me in the eye. So then I'm about ready to start, and I see Mike waving to me, and I said, what? So I went down to see, and he says, well, they're telling me I can't record. I said, well, who's telling you that? What's the problem? You're already set up. Because I saw him, he's taking things down. Well, so Harris had sent this guy over to tell him, you're not allowed to record. Now, this is a public DeKalb County institution. I'm a member of the museum. I pay my taxes, right? It's an open forum.
You're volunteering and everyone's there voluntarily.
Yes. And he's telling me I can't record. So that was my first, that sort of began to derail me right there, right? Because I was figuring, we're going to get a great little hour synopsis about this. I'm down on the stage. It's the Atlanta Geological Society. I brought at least a dozen, maybe more people, just like the first time, that came there to hear my lecture. There might have been 20 people that came there to hear my lecture. At least double the normal number that would be there who's the membership. A lot of these people would have joined. In fact, I was going to join the Geological Society, right? But I was, okay, so now I get ready to start. What does he do? He comes up on the stage and plunks himself down on the stage and opens a laptop. And so he's sitting there while I start talking. He's over there
recording you.
Check everything I'm saying, right? Sitting on the stage. So my first thought is, dude, what are you doing? So first, you're not going to let me record. Now you're going to sit on the stage and fact check me. So I get 10, 15 minutes into it. And then he goes something about, you're quoting a bunch of old papers. There's been a lot of work since then, and those papers are obsolete. He didn't even know what papers I was talking about.
Hold on, he just piped up?
He just piped in. He just inserted himself.
While you're giving the presentation.
Interrupted my flow to start an argument. And nothing he said over the next 10 minutes, I tried to answer rationally and say, well, no, look, I'm trying to establish a historical context here, right? And you're telling me that these papers are not valid because they were from the early 70s. Well, we're talking about physics here. How much heat to melt how much ice, okay? Mm-hmm. Well, so this totally robbed me of 10 to 15 minutes of my carefully prepared presentation.
Well, it's just disrespectful as hell, particularly from a former leader of the organization.
Rude. It was insulting. It was unprofessional. When it's over, he comes up and is wagging his hand in my face, red in the face, telling me, it's you and Graham Hancock's fault that I can't get this paper published. And I said, what? It was my fault and Graham Hancock's fault that he couldn't get some paper published. Then I'm packing up and everybody's left, gone out, including him. And then I come out, and there's still a few people mingling in the parking lot. And I think Harris is gone because I didn't see him. But I had to, get my laptop up, and we got Mike's equipment, recording equipment loaded up and stuff. Some of the people came over and said, yeah, he was out here ranting in the parking lot to the people that were out there that he had to uphold the standards of science. And I thought, okay, yeah, well, that's what you do. That's what you do, dude. You rudely, unprofessionally, you interject, you interrupt me in the middle of a talk, and you derail it by bringing up a bunch of completely irrelevant stuff, remarks, and questions. It had nothing to do with what I was trying to say. It was extremely rude. I still get pissed when I think about it. And none of those people that came with me, including myself, decided that we were going to join the Atlanta Geological Society.
Of course not.
Scott Harris was going to be the president.
But Randall, didn't you suspect?
It did not matter that my professor who was there, who was the president, gave me a glowing introduction. Just, my abilities, that I was one of the top students she'd ever had, that I had received the Outstanding Geology Student of the Year award. That didn't matter. She gave me that. So he had his mind made up that somehow myself and Graham Hancock were responsible. He couldn't get a paper published, and it was our fault. And therefore, he was going to derail me. Before the thing even started, I heard some things in the grapevine that, somebody there is worried that your talk is going to be controversial. And I said, what? Well, I hope it's at least somewhat controversial, right? But I had no idea who or what was behind those claims that,
hey, Randall, his final paragraph to Shermer was, I watched Carlson's lecture live and no such thing happened. Carlson's lecture was hosted by the Atlanta Geological Society, of which Scott Hurst is president.
No such thing happened. There were 40 people there that all watched it happen.
Okay, but hold on. How did he watch your lecture live if it wasn't streamed?
Would have been there.
Because when I heard that, it occurred to me that, wait a minute, was Harris then pumping me out live to his cohorts without telling me and letting me know, hey, I'm going to sit over here on stage and I'm not going to let you record, but I'm going to put this thing out live to somebody.
No, just as I was saying earlier, the king of all sciences is psychology. Geology is a hard science. Psychology is a soft science. And here is the hard science bowing like a $2 whore on a Friday night to the soft science.
That's exactly right. It is sociological. It is not scientific.
Listen to the whole thing live, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Is that what Shermer said?
No, the other guy, I think it was not Shermer.
No. Boslow.
Boslow. Yeah. Boslow's, he's probably lying. And this is also a Randall. This is a personal thing as somebody who can handle those kinds of dickheads in the real time. When somebody comes to you with that Gish Gallop kind of bullshit, where they're just gonna fucking throw stuff at you that's nonsensical. They're just gonna try to derail you. I generally quickly accuse, he said, well, you missed this paper and you're like, oh yeah, but didn't you realize that paper was written by a couple of Holocaust deniers, and they just send them right off into the fucking corner? Fuck you. Wait a minute. And it doesn't, if he's going to lie tell him a lie that's going to make him go get on Google and spend the next 20 minutes finish your presentation and go argue with him in the parking lot.
Well, if I knew, see, I went into that thing innocent. I had no idea that this clown was going to be, in aftermath. I thought, well, now if I knew what was going on, and when he plunked himself down on the stage, first of all, I said, dude, what are you doing up here on the stage? Why are you sitting right over there?
Yeah,
laptop doing
all. That's just rude.
That's distracting, dude. That's rude. That's rude.
I need a soda, sir.
He was literally trolling you. He was physically trolling you in person.
And when he then launched into these irrelevant questions and comments, if I had known what I know now, I would have said, dude, shut the fuck up, or I'm going to throw you off the fucking stage.
There you go.
That's really where my feeling is about the whole thing now. And so I'm like, this guy is going to set himself up as the upholder of the standards of science, but he wouldn't even give me a fair hearing because supposedly, I don't know what his logic is, but like 40 years of research, hundreds of thousands of miles in the field, thousands of scientific papers read, dozens of geologists, archaeologists, astronomers that I have studied with, getting the top student of the year award out of hundreds and hundreds of other students. None of that mattered at all. None of that mattered. See, that's how these guys operate.
That's it's all
very
comes down,
successful.
it's partisan. I need to get going soon, and I think you do.
Okay, yeah. Let's wrap it up. That fired us all up. Okay.
Be okay though, Randall. The other thing, it's one of the things I do a lot on Twitter when guys come at me and they tell me a lot of lies. I'll just accuse them of being a Holocaust denier point blank. Aren't you? Wasn't your? I'm surprised that you had time to stop checking all those Epstein
when did you
emails
stop denying the Holocaust?
Well, yeah. Why? How did you find so much time to talk when I thought you were checking all those emails to make sure the black bars were over your name too?
Well, let me just close with this. He said, I just called Scott Harris to see if he can do it. This is him taking a dive. Like, okay, in case you need a YDI8 skeptic on your podcast as soon as March, he has agreed and is available on those dates. Then he says later, Scott and I have the same approach to skepticism and science. We both want to focus on the evidence and have no interest in engaging in personal insults or mudslinging with George or anyone else. George should be prepared to talk about the evidence, stop the profanity and personal attacks, and commit to telling the truth this time. Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. No. I'll reserve my right to profanity, you asshole. I will refrain from personal attacks.
Well, I always love it when somebody's like, boy, you know what? I sure had a hard time talking to that guy because he was sure such a cocksucker. I just wish that he would refrain from those personal attacks.
I wish he did refrain from the personal attacks.
It all started when he hit me back, Mom.
Listen, Mark Boslow was so freaked out by the Talal Imam paper. Literally, it got published. He was so freaked out. I wish you could search Twitter better. I'll go find it. But my recollection is within 24 hours, he lives in Albuquerque, where Trinity Southwest University, who sponsored the dig, is housed as well. He drove to their headquarters, which we're pitiful, but it's a modest religious operation. That he drove to the shopping center that they happen to be housed in, right? Because these people live on pennies and dimes. And it was anti-Christian bigotry. He said, look at how pitiful these people's headquarters location is, and was taking pictures. I mean, creepy shit like that, man. Like the words in the black and white text in nature can't serve for themselves. He needs to go take a picture of his opponent's supposedly modest concerns that undermine their data. It's absolutely that he's an anti-Christian bigot. The whole Talal Imam thing was an absolute act of anti-Christian bigotry from beginning to end by a bunch of woke assholes. And I will appear on a podcast with Mark Boslow any day of the week, any time of the day. Bring it on. Okay.
All right.
Okay, guys. I enjoyed it.
The last thing, let me interject it. You're going to like this, George. I'm putting together the definitive whole shall I say, depiction, elaboration of the Younger Dryas, going right back to the discovery of the flower, the Dryas octopetala.
Well, you're doing that with John Arthur, correct?
No, I'm doing this with this is Mike Robertson.
You're doing Mike Robertson. Okay.
Yeah, with Mike Robertson, and so I'm going through it chronologically. I'm going back to literally going back to Nathorst was his name. He was the one he was a botanist and a geologist, and he was in the 1870s, wrote a paper on the appearance of Younger Dryas, its disappearance and its reappearance. And so that's what's become
all the way back. This is it's a long time.
His paper was 1877.
Yeah. This poor Wally Broker, who is the father of the understanding of that climate catastrophe, and actually called the father of global warming. And a memo within a year of his death said he believed the Younger Dryas was caused by an impact. Okay, so Mark Boslow, come answer that.
Oh, the answer to that's going to be he was clearly a racist.
Oh yeah.
No. Why doesn't that enter into the story for the mainstream that the gentleman that was the lead climate researcher for Lamont Doherty, Columbia's geophysical research lab.
Yeah.
Of global note, I mean, they are the climate guys. The climate guy at the climate lab says, I think the Younger Dryas was caused by an impact. It's in a memo called Wally's Notes or Wally whatever, and to his own lab, saying that these guys are right. And it's left out of there's all these little things that just indicate that it is fuckery.
I'm quoting, how do you say his last name?
Boswell?
Brucker?
Oh, Wally Broker.
Broker. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quote him. Yeah, I quote him in
Give a quote from Broker in that memo. Because I dug that up. I found that and put it on the Cosmic Tusk like over 10 years ago.
Well, if you recall, George, and I know we want to drag this out, but when we had the round table with Malcolm there and
and Graham.
That's been what, 10 years now? Has that been 10 years?
Yeah, exactly. It was 2015.
Oh, no kidding. Wow.
No, it was 2017. It was 2017.
So
just short. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So if you recall, I presented some preliminary research on where I believe the evidence is pointing to specific locations, impact locations on the ice sheet.
Yeah.
And I think we could. And so I've been following that up since then. I've done a lot more work on that, and I'm pretty much thoroughly convinced that we can now identify anomalous areas in the terrain that are exactly what you would expect with a hypervelocity impact into a half kilometer to a kilometer thick ice sheet.
Randall, will you come back on with me and let's just fly around Google Earth and you show us that stuff?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would.
Okay. That's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you, Dan Richards.
No problem.
I love you guys. Oldest rat in the barn and the newest kid on the block. I couldn't be more privileged to have you both on.
Well, it's great to talk to you, George. Great to talk to you too, Randall. It's always good to see you guys.
See you guys soon.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, dude,
Over
take
now.
care.